thank you very much. This is big stuff. The lights of Caracas were largely turned off due to a certain expertise. For many years after his term as president of Venezuela expired, Maduro remained in power and waged a ceaseless campaign of violence, terror, and subversion against the United States of America, threatening not only our people, but the stability of the entire region.
The most important principle of the rule of law that supports everything, I mean, the very reason we have law is to have an alternative to lawlessness and violence, for people taking matters into their own hands, using physical force to get their way. We have a neutral set of principles. We don't allow people to beat each other up to get what they want. We don't allow countries to use the equivalent violence amongst themselves to get ahead in the world. The world thrives on peace, on harmony, on a well-ordered system where treaties matter. That's why after the worst disorder of all time, the Second World War, the UN Charter was instituted. It has a core principle prohibiting the use of military force with very narrow limitations for self-defense. If an actual armed attack, military force attack happens on your territory, the kind of thing that Ukraine is fighting against Russia's invasion, or if the Security Council authorizes the force. So when Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, the Security Council authorized the whole world to liberate Kuwait. Those are the two situations that really matter. There are a few cases of consent. That was one of the justifications, partial justifications the U.S. tried to use for Panama, because there was an elected leader who said, yes, use military force. But there's limitations on consent also, and there is certainly no one in a position to consent to these attacks by the U.S. in Venezuela. President Trump ordered a major case of military force in which people have died. There's been destruction, there is great fear, without any basis, justification in the law. Think about it. The U.S. has been trying since 1945 to support peace in the world through the United Nations. That's why the UN exists. But this is a slap in the face of those rules, saying that somehow President Trump gets to decide what is the right to use military force. And that is going to cause great dissension in the world. It won't help in the short run to reinstate U.S. leadership and support for international law. It's going to cause more mistrust. It's going to take many years before the U.S. can regain its sense of, or its respect as a leading rule of law and democracy. I'm afraid that President Trump has probably been misled into thinking that this action would somehow be comparable to Panama in 1989. There's been some whitewashing of that incident. Panama has had a popularly elected leader who was able to take over. Remember, Panama was a very small country. We had a large U.S. troop presence in that country. There was a popularly elected person waiting to take power, and the U.S. supported that regime change. Let's also remember that many hundreds of people died in Panama. And we never got an official death count. This was all suppressed, because it's completely unclear to me that the people of Panama could not have created a peaceful revolution and removed Noriega themselves and put him on trial themselves. So that is in many ways absolutely the wrong case for President Trump to have been thinking about when he has used this military force. As far as we know, the vice president has taken over. She's asked for signs of life. So this is just the Chavez-Maduro regime continuing, even if Maduro has been unlawfully removed from the country and may somehow at some point be facing trial in the U.S. This looks like it will not fundamentally change what's happening in Venezuela. This is not a clear triumph for democracy. It's certainly a terrible undermining of the rule of law. I don't have a lot of praise for President Xi, he has serious human rights violations on his record. His uses of force and aggression in the South China Sea are despicable, and it could be that someone who has that mindset will say, look, nothing serious is happening to the U.S. He won't see the long-term damage that this is doing, or the long-term undermining of China's own interests in taking any kind of action that would align with or be supportive of what President Trump is doing. So I can't predict how someone with his mindset will react to this. I do know in the course of history, seeing that countries who comply with international law are the successful ones, are the ones that end up being the leaders in the world, the countries that really have the moral currency to lead. And the US has not done well out of past invasions. 2003 invasion of Iraq, this is similar to that, not to Panama. And that has cost this country dearly, it's cost the world dearly. Staying on for decades in Afghanistan, long after the Taliban regime fell, that was unlawful. That has cost this country. We could go back to Vietnam. We could talk about the dirty wars of Central America, which have so undermined the stability of the region and helped produce people like Chavez and Maduro. These are if you really read history and read and understand how international law can work to successfully create the world we want, or when it's ignored and violated, lead to these constant problems we have, the very problems President Trump is rightfully concerned about. Maduro is no hero. We do need to get a handle on the drug trade and the human trafficking trade around the world, in the Americas. We won't do it through violating the law. We will do it by reinstating and supporting the law, creating courts that are brave enough to stand up to lawlessness. If Maduro has good legal representation, the case will turn out, I predict, differently than that of Noriega. It will at least stretch on for a very long time and probably go to the Supreme Court. That's my best prediction. I wish the U.S. courts were more committed to understanding how international law would prohibit this kind of trial. Let's not forget, our courts have tolerated Guantanamo Bay and the illegal detention of people there for decades without any kind of trial, let alone a fair trial. So it's going to be complicated. I'll leave it at that. And the clarity in this complication is that international law does not support this kind of indictment, trial, and prosecution. And how the international community, especially those countries committed to the rule of law, to human rights, to peace, and to the United Nations Charter, how they react will be extremely important in...
That war has become a bloodbath, and we wanted to get some.
Thank you very much.